Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. I stumbled across a game the other day that I was intrigued by and I felt I could learn a lot from it by having a closer look. So why not have a close look together and check out this game by Vassily Ivanchuk versus Shankland. Played in Cuba in the Capablanca Memorial 2017. Ivanchuk and Shankland, I believe, co-leaders in this game. Before this game, in round 5, they both had 2.5 out of 4. Cuba, maybe one of Ivanchuk's favorite tournaments. He plays there. Feels like every year it's a 6-player round-robin, double round-robin tournament, I would guess. As you can see, I don't really know much except that I liked this game a lot. By the reigning rapid chess world champion at the age of 48, Ivanchuk still very much going strong. But he's facing a tough opponent in Olympic champion Shankland from the USA. Ivanchuk goes d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, the queen's Indian. Contrary to my usual habits, I won't spend a lot of time in the opening and early middle game because the part that intrigued me about this game was the endgame. So we'll get there quite quickly. g3, main line, bishop b4, one of many lines, bishop d2, bishop e7. Arguing this bishop plays worse here than on c1 in some of the lines to follow. Knight c3, bishop g2, I believe is more popular. Bishop b7, queen c2, a rare move once again. Both players freestyling a bit. You can see the computer bar already says black is slightly better because the computer enjoys this move knight c6, threatening knight takes d4 here. When the game could get very messy early on. Something like this is a line that my computer spits out. He says black is doing all right. The game continued along more conventional paths. Castles, bishop g2, knight c6. Now threatening to take here, but of course that is parried by castles. And Shankland's idea was to free his position very quickly by going d5 here. White is nothing better than c takes d5 and knight to b4. This knight will recapture on d5 and we'll get a typical structure where black seems to be doing all right. All of his pieces are developed. c5 shall follow soon. And for white, it's going to be a question if he can avoid mass simplification and just shaking hands. Not an easy thing to do. Ivanchuk goes for rook fd1, natural enough move. And Shankland decides to enter the endgame with queen to e8. Knight takes c3 was an alternative. When I guess after bishop takes c3, white is still slightly better. It's not so easy to get in c5. Black should still settle for queen e8, maybe queen d5. Now Shankland's move is very natural. Queen e8, offering the exchange of queens. Ivanchuk has no objections, takes rook fe8. Knight e5, opening this diagonal, hoping to profit from the fact that the bishop on b7 is not defended while the bishop on g2 is. That's why this relationship between these two bishops on the long diagonal is often in the g2 bishop's favor, because there's more tactics against the b7 bishop. Still, after knight e5, black manages to go c5, exchanging the central pawn and freeing his position further. White is the slightest bit better here, maybe, because c6 square, the c6 square could be a bit of a weakness, and sometimes if there's mass simplifications, the black queenside pawns can turn out to be a little weak. But it has to be said that it feels like Shankland solved most of his opening problems quite confidently in this game. But we're just getting started. Rook ac1. To show you that black can't just exchange all the pieces and go home, I'll show you a sample line. Knight takes e3 was not played in the game, but if he decides to do that, bishop takes g2, king takes g2. Now you gotta be a little careful that white doesn't manage to establish a knight on c6. So let's say knight d5, bishop d4, takes, rook c8. The game simplifies quite a bit, but even this endgame would be fairly unpleasant for black. The knight goes to c6, e4 is looming. The black queenside is a little vulnerable. And yeah, it's not a fun position to play. So you always gotta be very careful in these Catalan structures, simplifying too much too early. I keep saying, no, Shankland is correct. Shankland. He goes rook ac8. Instead of simplifying, the computer prefers the move bishop to d4. Weird looking move between you and me after knight d5 who wants e takes d5. But I don't think humans would typically go for lines like this. Rook ac8, naturally enough, has only one drawback. It slightly weakens the a7 pawn. Ivanchuk decides to jump to b5 to exploit that. However, Shankland plays the very natural reply a6, and the question is, what did white have in mind? The next move is the reason why I chose to show you this game, and I'm still very intrigued by it, because I really can't see myself ever playing that move, which is probably a gap in my chess education. For starters, it's not the computer's preferred move. The computer shows some crazy lines, starting with knight a7, trying to exploit this square. Now this move has to be calculated extremely carefully, and I'm not surprised Ivanchuk didn't want to put his knight on a7, where it looks like it could disappear very quickly. The computer, with the help of some crazy tactics, makes it all work. b4, bishop d6, knight c4. I'll briefly show you a sample line. And white regains his piece and is better. But this is not really how humans play. However, depending on the human, the next move is also not really how humans play. But Ivanchuk decides to go rook takes c5 here, the star move of this game, because this is not just a petite combinaison, a fake sacrifice, where white will soon get his material back. This is a long-term investment. White will get one pawn, but he will remain an exchange down. And Ivanchuk just argues that with his very active pieces, getting rid of this key defender of the dark squares, he has enough compensation, or more than enough compensation, to do this. Which, yeah, I was very intrigued by. So rook takes c5 is forced, knight to d6, and we can already sense there's some problems for black. For example, you can't go rook e7, defending both f7 and b7, because after e4, this knight has nowhere to go. Knight c7, knight b7 would be bad news. So black has to go rook b8, and of course, both sides had seen this. Now white can take the f7 pawn, and we get the material balance that we'll have for a while. White has a bishop and a pawn for the black rook, which is not a grave material disadvantage, but still would be enough to scare me away from not doing this. But Ivanchuk argues that the e6 pawn, combined with the weakness of the dark squares, is full compensation. Bishop to a8, fair enough, getting out of the way so you don't have to think about the bishop hanging in many lines anymore. White goes e4. The knight has to retreat to c7, where it keeps an eye on e6. And another move that impressed me a lot, even though it's a typical move for these structures, when you're dealing with a knight on f6 and a bishop on the long diagonal. With white, you often want to go e4 and then follow it up with f3, because this pawn chain restricts the black minor pieces quite well. But it's very slow, and Ivanchuk shows he's in no hurry whatsoever to win back any material. He just wants to improve his position. Yeah, I keep repeating myself, but it gave me a lot of food for thought that maybe white is just not material down here. It's all in our heads, or in my head at least, with the bishop pair and the pawn weaknesses. No reason to do anything. e4, f3. Shankland keeps defending well. He goes rook f8, asking this knight, where do you want to go? And Ivanchuk has to use some tactics to get it out of the way. He plays bishop to e3. And first of all, I wasn't sure about this, but it seems, at least according to the computer, white is seriously better here. Now the position would have transformed and black would have two minor pieces versus a rook. But after e5, knight f5, f4, this pawn is probably too weak. And white goes rook c1, rook takes c5. And if he gets two pawns, then he's seriously better. So Shankland does not do that. Instead, moves his rook away, rook c2, very natural, going after these pawns. And the knight has a nice square to retreat to on e5. My first instinct would be to grab another pawn here, rook takes b2, and say I'm a clear exchange up. But once again, Black has to be extremely careful about the activity of the white pieces here. Rook to c1, targeting this guy, knight to b5, and a nice little move, knight to c8. Threatening knight takes b6, maybe a4 followed by knight b6, but also another threat. If black is careless here, goes rook takes a2, knight e7 check, king h8, knight f7. All of a sudden black gets checkmated. Of course not forced, but just a sample line to show you the looming dangers in the position. Instead, after knight to e5, Shankland goes for the move rook to d8, good move, pinning this knight on d6 and saying, you know what, I've activated both of my rooks, you have all these nice minor pieces, but I don't think I'm in trouble here. Which is correct, Shankland has defended well, he's not worse, but the position remains tough to play. Ivanchuk plays another slow move showing he's in no particular hurry, goes bishop f1, improving this passive bishop. Maybe he wants to go here, maybe here, wants to keep an eye on a6. Still not very concerned about rook takes b2, this time because of another very cute little tactic. White would go rook c1, we've already seen this, and after rook takes d6, he would not take on c7, but he would go knight to c4. It turns out this knight forks both rooks and it's impossible for black to avoid the loss of a full rook here, and after white gets his rook back, he would have a serious advantage. So rook takes b2 was not the solution. The computer says the best move here is b5, which, once you see it, fairly logical, as all the computer moves, restricting this bishop so it can never go to c4, saving the b6 pawn, taking the c4 square under control. And it seems like white does not have anything better, or I don't know, according to the computer, than a draw here. There's different ways to achieve that. For example, bishop d3, rook b2, bishop b6, rook d6, bishop c7, rook d4. And it looks like black is in good shape, but after bishop b6, this rook has nothing better than going back to d6, when white can at least repeat moves, because if the rook were to go somewhere else, the background would tell and white would win. Still, this b5 means that black was not really worse or outplayed, but it did feel like that to me. It's a tricky balance between the computer would save this and posing practical problems. And yeah, black hasn't done anything particularly wrong, so he shouldn't be in trouble. But that Ivanchuk chose this and managed to create these problems, I still found very noteworthy. And Shankland does not play b5 in the game. He goes for the move knight f to e8. Also very logical. He's trying to use this pin, trying to win more material. But of course, that is not going to happen because white can break the pin by going bishop d3, attacking this rook and unpinning his knight. Of course, both sides had seen that. Rook takes b2 was the plan, taking another pawn. Ivanchuk once again shows, I'm not in a hurry. Knight dc4, rook takes a2. Now black is in exchange and currently a pawn up. But after bishop takes b6, first of all, he's no longer a pawn up. Secondly, we see the white minor pieces work together beautifully and offer, at the very least, full compensation for the exchange. Especially his bishop on a8 is not a pretty sight because it can't really do much against this wall of pawns. I'm not sure if this position is too bad for black, but it's certainly tough to defend. With computer moves, it's possible. Like a5 is what the computer recommends here, but who would give this pawn up voluntarily? Shankland plays a different move. He goes for rook to a4, trying to keep his rook eyeing the white minor pieces. But after rook a4, rook c1, it seems like now black is already in serious trouble because it's so hard to undermine the white construction, while white can just improve his position further. This piece can't move, this can't move. This bishop can only go to b7, which is not much better. So we're more or less limited to rook movements. And after rook b8 at any point, you always have to take knight to d7 into account. We'll see this idea later. Shankland goes rook b4, tries to target the white minor pieces still. Ivanchuk brings the king. no hurry whatsoever. Rook b5. You know what? Still no hurry. Bishop f1. I don't need this bishop on the d file anymore. Let's make sure it's never hanging. Get out of the way. Maybe one day you can cash in. Rook to b8. Trying to break the white grip by going after this bishop. But there is this move, knight d7, which I'm sure Shankland had anticipated. But now it turns out he's already in trouble. He goes rook to d8 back. Maybe rook b7 was more resilient. But who wants to do that? White is still better in this position after, let's say, bishop e2. And the black pieces really are a sorry sight. So rook d8 was Shankland's plan. The white pieces keep maneuvering beautifully. Knight ce5. Defends this knight on d7. Attacks the knight on c7. And attacks the rook on b5. So does a lot for one move. Black doesn't lose material just yet because of rook b2 check. The king says, I've done my duty on f2. I don't need to go to the center. I'll go back to g1. King to g1. And now what are you planning to do about defending that knight? Rook c8 comes to mind. Then bishop takes a6. He's using the pin. And white wins. So there's no longer a way out. Black, of course, can give the exchange back, but then white's positional advantage would just be tremendous. This pawn is isolated, this pawn is isolated. The black minor pieces don't really coordinate. This would be pretty hopeless. Instead, Shankland tries a trick. He goes bishop b7 to activate this bishop. And after the obvious bishop takes c7, he's hoping to get his material back by pinning the bishop with rook c8. But that was not going to work because Ivanchuk has one more little finesse up his sleeve. The move knight to d3 is key here. Defending his rook on c1, attacking the black rook, so black doesn't have time to take on c7 yet. And by having his rook defended, freeing the way for this bishop to go away. After this bishop makes it out, white now has two minor pieces. Not sure which two, but two minor pieces against the rook, which is a decisive material advantage. The game could have ended here. Shankland continues a bit, but all that's left to do for Ivanchuk is coordinate his pieces, target the black weaknesses, and win. And that's very much what happens. Do not hurry. Sign of good technique. He's just expanding, keeping everything covered, grabbing more and more space. And now goes after the weakness on e6, which can't be defended. Therefore, Shankland had seen enough and resigned. Strange game, but I found it fascinating. I hope you liked it too. Yeah, I'm mainly intrigued because after knight b5 must have been played with the intention to play here. And Ivanchuk's judgment that he can pose problems from this position where he's a clear exchange down and just continue playing quietly, I was very impressed by. Doesn't mean that white was winning by doing this, but the idea and the evaluation of this position. Yeah, pretty good. I hope you liked the game too. There's still a lot of play left in the Capablanca Memorial, so you can follow that before the biggest tournament, maybe of the year, the strongest tournament of the year starts. The Norway, Altibox Norway Chess Tournament, featuring almost the entire top 10 of the world's best players. I think 9 of the 10 are currently in the top 10. Then there's Anish Giri. I'll be doing commentary on that one together with the great Peter Svidler here from our Chess24 studios. Come to chess24.com and check that out if you want. And yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. See you in the next one. Bye.